I'm going to be starting a new weekly series every Friday here on my channel. I've been talking about how I'll be uploading videos every day during the college football season, but I needed to figure out what kind of content to post on Fridays. Well, here we have it. If you're into daily fantasy, this weekly series will be for you. If you're not into daily fantasy, maybe watching these videos will change your mind. Every Friday, I'll be sharing my favorite higher and lower entries in college football. I'll share my pick'ems and go a little more in depth on why I think it's a good entry. If you'd like to make the college football season even more exciting and win some money during the process, here's how you can. Underdog Fantasy is excited to give me this exclusive offer for my YouTube subscribers. Use promo code Harris to receive a 100% deposit match up to $100 if you sign up. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game. You pick at least 2 players and can choose as many as 5. You choose a player and decide whether or not their stats will be higher or lower than the number given. The more you choose and get right, the more money you win. Last week was a great one for me, as I got 5 pick'ems right on Saturday and turned $25 into $500. So if you deposit $50, they'll add $50 into your account. If you deposit $100, that's $100 of free money. They also have a promo going on for this upcoming Sunday night as well. Saquon Barkley needs just 1 total yard. That's it. If he gets it, you win. It's that simple. So if you'd like to win money this college football season, make sure to download the Underdog Fantasy app and use promo code Harris for a 100% deposit match up to $100. You can also sign up using the link in my description. You're going to notice a trend in this video, as almost all of these pick'em entries are going to be higher. Plus, it's just a lot more fun when you're rooting for your players to do well. We'll kick things off in the USC game, as I have 2 separate Caleb Williams entries. The first is 3.5 touchdowns, which I have him going higher, and 331.5 passing yards, which I also have higher. For Caleb Williams, he has 4 passing touchdowns in both of his games and hit that number in 5 games last season. Last week, Hawaii allowed 355 yards and 3 passing touchdowns to Stanford. In last season's matchup against Stanford, Caleb Williams threw for 340 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. The spread in this game is USC by 4 scores, so they're expecting USC to win this game by 28 points. Well, if that's the case, right there could be all of Caleb Williams' numbers for you. We'll go over to Washington, where I have Michael Penix Jr. at 338.5 passing yards higher. He threw for 450 passing yards last week. Last season, in 8 of 13 games, he threw for at least 337 yards. He's going for the Heisman Trophy, so I expect him to be lighting up the stat sheet every week. Although I don't have these 2 entries jotted down, here's a bonus one in case you want to get in on the Washington game. I recommend going higher on both Washington wide receivers. If Penix Jr. is able to hit 340 yards, he should be able to hit this for both wide receivers, who each surpassed these marks in last week's game against Boise State. This next one is an interesting one as we go to the Colorado-Nebraska game. We'll start out with Shedeur Sanders, whose current entry is 2.5 passing touchdowns. For this one, I'm going lower, and I'll explain why. Also, this one is actually a boosted payout. If you pick this entry, your payout can be up to 25 times your money. I get that it's going to be very fun to ride the wave from last week, but Nebraska allowed an opposing quarterback to throw 3 or more touchdowns only once all of last season. This could really turn into a defensive game, and 3 passing touchdowns is a lot. If you want to have fun with it, by all means, go for it, but Nebraska's defense is 10 times better than TCU's was last week. We're going to stay in this game and go to the other side, as I have Jeff Sims going higher for his 65.5 rushing yards. He rushed for 115 yards last week against Minnesota. Now he faces a Colorado team that allowed 260 yards on the ground against TCU, and I don't think they're going to have an answer for Jeff Sims, and I don't think they'll be able to stop him at all. Honestly, Sims should have a field day with this defense. He's rushed for more than 60 yards in 11 career games, and this might be one of the worst defenses he's ever faced. One of the more exciting games of the weekend is going to be Texas at Alabama, and I have both quarterbacks in this one. We'll start with Quinn Ewers, who I have at 19.5 completions, going higher. I think Texas is going to be playing from behind in this game, and they're going to be needing to catch up. Last week against Rice, Quinn Ewers had 19 completions, and Texas was in control pretty much the entire game. Last season, Alabama averaged over 18 completions per game allowed, and they did allow 24 last week to Middle Tennessee. Meanwhile, the other quarterback, Jalen Milroe, his rushing yards is 51.5, and I have that for higher as well. In 4 games in his career in which he's made at least 9 passing attempts, he's rushed for 91 yards, 81 yards, and 48 yards. So essentially, if he's seen significant action in the game, he's rushing a lot. Last season, Texas allowed 125 rushing yards per game as well. We'll head to the Miami Texas A&M game. We'll start on A&M side with wide receiver Evan Stewart, who's at 64.5 receiving yards, and I go higher. He had 115 receiving yards last week for Texas A&M. He showed up in big games last season as he had more than 85 receiving yards against teams like Alabama, Florida, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. He's Connor Wigman's #1 target, so he should see a lot of volume. Last season, Miami allowed over 230 passing yards per game as well. Tyler Van Dyke's entry is 1.5 passing touchdowns, and I'm going to go lower. He had only 2 passing touchdowns in 3 of 9 games last season. Last week against Miami of Ohio, he threw only 1 passing touchdown. He also didn't throw a single touchdown in last year's meeting at Texas A&M. Last season, Texas A&M's defense allowed only 1.3 passing touchdowns a game, and they allowed only 2 passing touchdowns in 5 of their 12 games. We'll go to the Ole Miss Tulane game and start with Tulane quarterback Michael Pratt. His entry is 230.5 passing yards, and I'm going to go higher. He threw for nearly 300 yards last week against a pretty good South Alabama team. He also hit 230 yards in 7 games last season. In 2022, Ole Miss allowed 220 passing yards per game, and whenever they faced a good quarterback, they would usually hit that number. It was the lousy quarterbacks and lousy teams that held that number down. Meanwhile, on the other side, Quinshon Judkins' entry is 109.5 rushing yards, and you guessed it, I'm going to go higher. He only rushed for 60 yards last week, but he wasn't needed at all against Mercer. In 2022, as a true freshman, he rushed for over 100 yards 8 times. Last season, Tulane allowed 152 rushing yards per game. We'll stick to running backs as we go to the Wisconsin-Washington State game. Wisconsin running back Braylon Allen has an entry of 104.5 rushing yards, and this one honestly seems like an easy one to go higher on. He rushed for 140 yards last week against Buffalo. When Wisconsin played Washington State last year, he barely missed as he rushed for 98 yards. Braylon Allen rushed for 105 yards in 7 of 12 games last season. He had rushed for 105 yards in 8 games in 2021. But pretty much any game he started and had 10 carries, he's hit this number. For Washington State Cameron Ward, I'm actually going to go lower on his 280.5 passing yards. He did throw for 450 yards last week against Colorado State, but don't let that number fool you. He threw for more than 280 yards only 5 times last season in 13 games. Last week, Wisconsin allowed only 194 yards through the air, and last season, Wisconsin allowed only 204 yards per game as well. In this game last season, Cameron Ward threw for only 200 yards. We'll move on to another quarterback in North Carolina quarterback Drake Maye, who's taken on Appalachian State. I'm going to go with the higher as it's currently 269.5 passing yards. Last week against South Carolina, he threw for exactly 269 yards. He also hit that number 11 times in 2022. In last year's matchup with App State, he threw for over 350 yards. We'll wrap up this video with one final game and a couple of other quarterbacks. We'll start with Texas Tech quarterback Tyler Shough, who I'm going to go higher on 275.5 passing yards. He's facing his former team, which is always an added incentive. Oregon allowed just under 260 passing yards a game last season, which is just below this number. Shough also threw for 340 yards last week, and I'm sure he's going to want to bounce back after last week's embarrassing loss. Plus, the Red Raiders are likely going to be playing from behind as well. We'll wrap this up with Bo Nix, whose rushing touchdown entry is just 0.5, meaning all he's got to do is get 1. Bo Nix didn't rush at all last week, which means his legs are probably fresh. He had 14 rushing touchdowns last season and was one of the better running quarterbacks in all of college football. All he has to do is get 1 rushing touchdown, so why not? In Bo Nix, we trust. Well, those are all of my pick'em entries that I like this week. If you'd like to join in on the fun, make sure to download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code Harris, and you'll have your first deposit match up to $100. They have entries for so many different college football games, so if there's a player or a game I didn't include in today's video, make sure you check them out and get in on the fun. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. I'm posting college football videos every day during the season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.